I recently had the opportunity to be interviewed by Mr. Taylor Henry, the Public Affairs Officer for the Archdiocese of the Military Services, on their podcast, The Catholic Military Life. It was so great, I thought I'd share it with you. And here's Taylor Henry.
From the Edwin Cardinal O'Brien Pastoral Center in Washington, D.C., home base for the Archdiocese for the Military Services, USA. This is Catholic Military Life, a podcast of the Archdiocese. I'm your moderator, Taylor Henry. And for this edition, it's my great pleasure to have as my guest retired Rear Admiral Gary E. Hall, joining us from Braunfels, Texas. Admiral Hall, welcome.
Hey, thank you very much, Taylor. Real pleasure to be here today.
And it's a pleasure to have you, sir. We're talking about your new book, Navigating Leadership, Making a Pact with Excellence.
Thank you.
Now available on Amazon. And Admiral Hall, you had a very distinguished career in the United States Navy, more than 20 years. During that time, you were involved in leading change, strategic planning, building coalitions, operations, program development, and command and control. You served as commander of the Expeditionary Strike Group Number 2, leading 27 ships and 16,000 sailors and Marines, including developing the transition plan for administrative staff into a deployable command unit. And you delivered enhanced deployable capabilities at lower cost to the 5th Fleet Commander in Bahrain in the Middle East. But not only that, in your private life, after you separated from the Navy, you have established yourself as a senior executive with experience in management, training, education, employment, and deployment of personnel. Admiral Hall, tell us about your book and what can we learn from your experiences that are recounted in the book about leadership.
Yes, Taylor. First of all, thank you for that kind introduction. A little bit long, a little bit over the top, exactly as I wrote it. So thank you very much. To summarize, I'm Rear Admiral Gary Hall, world-famous helicopter pilot, adventurer, sportsman, and world traveler. I'm perhaps the finest helicopter pilot I know, call sign Viper. And I'll be your commanding officer during your tour here at this Top Gun podcast.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Taylor. Now, you mentioned the book, and it's leadership lessons throughout my career, throughout my life. And I also say it's a homage to my beautiful wife, Darlene. And there's stories of my transition from sinner to on a path of being a saint, and my transition to the Catholic faith. So it's navigating leadership, making a pact with excellence. And the PACT stands for passion, accountability, commitment, traits and behaviors of a good leader. So, and as I used to teach for Father Byrne at our parish on Capitol Hill, I would say, at one point my priorities were Gary, 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 and Darlene would say, and Gary. And she asked me, and I was very successful in my Navy career. I'd forced myself to be successful. And everybody wanted to fly with me, deploy with me, party with me, hang with me, go to happy hour with me. And my wife said, oh, that's all very well and good, but when are you going to start being an awesome father and an awesome husband? And that tough question made me rethink my life and make my transition fully into my Catholic faith. And then after searching, introspection, exercises, a professional therapist, I've changed my priorities to faith, family, Navy. And at that point, my career took off like a skyrocket.
Wow. Well, you mentioned Father Byrne. Admiral Gary Hall, you and I were both parishioners at Father Byrne's parish when you and he were both here in Washington at St. Peter's on Capitol Hill. He's now the Bishop of Springfield, Massachusetts. And he writes a foreword in your book and recounts the day that you showed up on his doorstep at the rectory volunteering to mow the grass or whatever else needed to be done. And the day before, he'd asked the Lord to send him someone to help him with a project, and you wound up being assigned by him to head that project, which was to organize Bible study groups. And well, I remember because I participated in it. Just one example of how you have used your leadership skills, not only in the Navy or in business, but also in the church.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, Taylor. And Bishop Byrne, when we started that study group, I might bounce around here a little bit. A couple of the leaders we got together were drinking a cold beverage, and one of the gentlemen said, "There's a pointy hat in the future of Father Byrne." And I told him that story, and sure enough, he's wearing that pointy hat now. But yeah, I had just been laid off from an industry job through restructuring, and I went to noon mass. And I went to Father Riffle, our parochial vicar, and said, "Father, I've got a lot of time on my hands. I need to occupy them. I'll do anything. I'll polish brass. I'll pull weeds. I'll buff the decks. Whatever you need me to do, I'll do it." And he said, let me talk to the pastor, Father Byrne. He may have something else for you." So he told me that I was an answer to his prayers. And in reality, he was the answer to my prayers, because he then became my spiritual advisor and changed my life.
And another foreword to your book, written by former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joe Dunford. And he talks about his experience with you as a leader. He describes you as a man of rock-solid character, exceptional operational competence, and a passion for taking care of people. Your sense of humor, he says, is accompanied by exemplary professionalism, and that throughout your Navy career, you earned the complete trust, admiration, and affection of those in your charge while leading from the front. Kind of unpack that for me.
Well, that's amazing. That's amazing what you can get from a 4-star general with only a $20 bill. No, I met Joe and I went, or General Dunford and I went through what we call capstone training for new admirals and generals when we were both selected as 1-stars. And you could just see that, okay, Joe is a compassionate, meticulous, extremely intelligent leader, and we knew he was going to go places. I just felt lucky to be in the same room with those folks. No, I've used, my mother put the fun in dysfunction and my father put the funk in dysfunction. And to survive my childhood, I used humor, not jokes, but humorous twists. And so in stressful situations, I've always used humor. And what I've found is that if you use humor in a professional life, you better be professional in all aspects. You have to work twice as hard. So, yes, I loved my sailors and Marines, and I was extremely professional, but used a humorous twist. And I think that lightens the mood of any organization. And when I was aide to a 3-star admiral, he said, "Gary, you don't command helicopters, you don't command buildings, you don't command hangars, you command and lead people." And so people were my passion, and it costs nothing to be nice to a sailor or a Marine. It costs nothing to pay attention to them and their needs. And this goes to my Catholic faith. And at one session with Bishop Byrne, I said, "I don't want to be creepy Catholic guy. That guy and he said, "I know a bunch of those people." But I didn't, you don't want to be at a party and somebody, "Don't go near him. He's going to sell you on Catholicism." And so what I learned is lead your life, react to situations, be professional, and be a person that others look at you and go, "What is it that he or she has? I want it." And then when that comes up, I say, "Well, it's my Catholic faith."
Well, it's like St. Francis is quoted as saying, "Go and preach the gospel, and when necessary, use words."
Absolutely. I just absolutely love that, and it really brings it home. But now, with Bishop Byrne, at one time during our spiritual direction, I told him, I said, "I'm world famous Gary Hall, world famous helicopter pilot. God wants something great for me to do." And he said, "I agree, and I can prove it." And I had a big smile on my face. I went, how are you going to prove that? And he said, you're still alive. And so if you're still alive, you can still do great things. And he pointed to Pope John Paul, saying he's even in dying, he showed us how to live, and how to live as a man of faith. And so he also said, well, Gary, I believe you, but also let's work on your humility. And so he printed out a prayer, folded it in half, smiled and chuckled and handed it to me. And he said, I want you to pray this a lot. And it's in my book. It's the Litany of Humility. And I'll tell you, if you've never read the Litany of Humility for our listeners, read that. And I'll tell you, it will be a punch when, right in the chest at the very end, when let others be more faithful than me, but let me be as faithful as you want me to be. And that's a paraphrase. But anyway, it's a very powerful prayer. And my wife occasionally has to point out, Gary, remember what Bishop Burns said, be humble. So sometimes it's humble being me. I mean, it's hard to be humble. It's hard to be humble being me.
I'm talking to retired Rear Admiral Gary E. Hall, and we're discussing, Admiral Hall, your new book, Navigating Leadership, Making a Pact with Excellence, now available on Amazon. Let's talk a little bit more about the PACT. Let's unpack the PACT, if you will.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
You have in your book a PACT exercise. Tell us a little more about that. Tell us more about what is PACT and what is the PACT exercise?
Well, it's the PACT stands for passion, accountability, commitment, and traits and behaviors. And so basically the exercise is there's a couple of exercises in the book, but, if you don't have passion, and passion isn't just, I talked the story about meeting Darlene, and instantaneously my eyeballs popped out of my head, my heart started pounding, and I fell in love with her immediately. She took a little bit extra time to fall in love with me. But you have to have passion or a desire to lead. And anytime you're in any organization, you are a leader or can be a leader. And so if you don't have passion, think about even Archbishop Broglio. He's leading right now he's leading the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. He has a passion for that. And if you don't have a passion or a desire to get in front of a group, it's going to be a hard and difficult walk to the front of an organization. And then so in the exercise, I ask you to take a look, what is your passion? What is your desire? And do you have it? If you don't have it, you better figure out how to get it. And then the next is accountability. You got to be accountable to your people, accountable to your profession, and accountable to yourself. Accountability is also responsibility. You're responsible to know your organization, your profession, your job, and you're responsible for your personal behavior. So accountability always remains with the person in charge, and responsibility can be delegated. They're two sides of the same coin. And then the third, the C, stands for commitment. You've got to be committed. When you're a priest and you're ordained, that first month of being called father, how wonderful is that? When you take command of a squadron, how wonderful is it that first week to be called skipper? But then things happen. Things get tough. You're a priest and you're dealing with death. You're a commanding officer. You're dealing with, readiness. And so it's commitment that keeps that passion, that flame going through difficult times. And I say commitment is like breakfast at Denny's. Take your Grand Slam breakfast. You got scrambled eggs, hash browns, toast, and bacon. Well, the farmer produced the potatoes to make hash brown. He's involved. The chicken is involved. She provided the eggs. But the baker is involved. He provided the bread for toast. But the pig is committed in providing that bacon. So you need to be the pig in your breakfast. So be committed. And then traits and behaviors, people are watching you no matter what you're doing. And so what are your traits? What are your behaviors? And I think the one behavior that I discuss is humility, and humility doesn't show weakness. But anyway, that's the PACT: passion, accountability, commitment, and traits and behaviors.
And you mentioned the humility prayer. Share with us some of the aspects, the thoughts, share with us some of that prayer. What are we asking the Lord for with the humility prayer?
Well,
aside obviously from humility.
Well, it's for the desire to be admired. May others, relieve me of that desire to be honored. The desire to be chosen. Jesus, relieve me from that desire to be chosen, and that others may be chosen. And so it helps you think about your place, the desire to be honored. Let others be honored before you. That might be a difficult thing, but when you accept that, it really grounds you and humbles you, because the Lord is going to have you recognized the way you should be. The old phrase, if you want to make God laugh, tell him what your plans are. Well, how about following his plan? And so it's basically saying, don't worry about these things. Don't worry about being honored. Don't worry about being hired. It's all in God's plan. It's all in God's hands. Pray that others be honored before you. Praise that others be selected before you. And, basically that'll ground you, and everything will happen and you'll be recognized.
Let's talk about your career in the Navy. Give us the brief. What 20 years? Some of the highlights.
Well, that was 20 years at the executive level, but 35 years total on active duty. And I started off as an enlisted sailor with the desire to go to the Naval Academy, and the Secretary of Navy appointed me, as well as another 100 young men, to go to the prep school and then to the Naval Academy. And I graduated with an engineering degree. And I saw a T-shirt recently that said, "Never underestimate an old man with an engineering degree." And I go, yes, that's me. I got my degree with a slide rule. Come on, you people with internet, Google, and AI. So I went to flight school and got selected for helicopters. It's the needs of the Navy. And your desire and your performance. And I got selected for helicopters, and I graduated number 1, went to Hawaii Squadron. And so I helped win the Cold War. You're welcome. So I was a helicopter pilot off frigates and destroyers hunting Soviet submarines in the day. And when I was a lieutenant commander, I was selected as the Navy's Helicopter Pilot of the Year. And so that's kind of at my height of ego-ness. And anyway, I went on to command a squadron and start a squadron in Japan, went to sea as an air boss on an amphibious assault ship. And people say, "What is the air boss?" I go, "Have you seen the movie Top Gun? He's the guy in the yellow jersey that says, 'Negative Maverick, the pattern is full.'" So I did that, and that was deck plate leadership to the max. I had 186 aviation bosun's mates. That when you see a movie like Top Gun and see all the different rainbow color of shirts out there, the air boss is in charge of those. And so then I wound up commanding a ship, and then after that selected for flag officer, and did all sorts of things. But I was blessed at every point, blessed that my wife, life is choice. Love is choice. Happiness is a choice. And when I was deployed, neighbors would say, "Darlene, how do you remain so happy?" And she said, "It's a choice. I'm a mother. I have 3 children. I choose to be happy." So, and I also say to young people, love is a choice. There's that chemical love at the beginning, but eventually it gets down to, this is where commitment takes over. It gets you through the rough times. My wife wakes up, gets out of bed 15 minutes before me, looks over at this big old retired admiral wearing a CPAP and goes, "Today, I choose to love him." So anyway, I had an awesome career, an operational career, and totally blessed. And definitely the Lord has guided me.
Wise words. You established the first Seahawk helicopter squadron in Japan. When was that? And tell me a little bit about how that went.
They finally, there's ships out in Japan that required, the support of helicopters. And finally, instead of deploying helicopters from San Diego or Hawaii to Japan, they just said, well, let's set up a squadron there. And that was a very difficult process because you're now moving, 200 people and their families to Japan. You're operating in, we were in World War II hangars at the time. And so there were many challenges to become ready. And so that's where, leadership really comes into place and identifying the right people to lead divisions and departments in the squadron. And anyway, in the book, I describe how to set goals, and I hand wrote goals out for the squadron, and we achieved them all. And we were recognized as the best squadron in the Pacific after 1 year of operational performance.
Very impressive. What years were those?
That was 91 through 93 when we set up the squadron at Atsugi, Japan.
Atsugi. We overlap again. I was living in Japan at that time in Tokyo as a reporter. Back in another life. And even though you have, when did you retire from the Navy?
I hate to tell people that because it's quickly winding up in my wake here, but it was 2010, and at that point I was commandant of the Eisenhower School at National Defense University.
I see. But you have continued to be involved with the Archdiocese for the Military Services. You currently still serve as the chairman of the Archdiocesan Review Board, and you also did a stint as a member of the National Review Board of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops from 2016 to 2020. Obviously, your faith is important to you. Now, tell me more about that. When did you have a big conversion in your life, or were you always a devout Catholic? Tell me more about your faith.
No, I grew up in the Lutheran faith, was baptized and confirmed as a Lutheran. When I graduated from the Naval Academy, I was never going to get married. And this young lady in Corpus Christi, Texas, was never going to date a Navy guy. And the two of us crossed paths, sparks burst. And next thing I know, we were married in the Catholic Church. And I got the dispensation for her to marry a Lutheran. So I was not a Catholic at the beginning of our marriage. But then I started attending Catholic Mass and going through the process, getting our children, baptized in the Catholic faith, First Communion, confirmation. And so I said, I now say I was a Catholic, but I wasn't sacramentalized. I was practicing the faith, but I was not brought totally into the faith. And so when my mother died, she was very organized. A box came to me, and it had all my baptism, all my confirmation things, and I had a Catholic chaplain. I was captain of the USS Tarawa, and I went up to the chaplain. I said, "Hey, chaplain, can you make me a Catholic?" And he goes, "We got 12 people that want to become Catholics. We'll do it on this deployment." So on deployment, I went through RCIA and necessarily didn't, grasp everything, but the priest said that's okay. And I was confirmed between the anchor chains on the USS Tarawa up in the forecastle, and that would have been in the year 2000.
Isn't that interesting? I've been on the USS Tarawa, and my father, who was a World War II correspondent in the Navy, back then you had to be in the Navy to be a war correspondent. He was a lieutenant, more of an honorific. He was at Tarawa. And the Battle of Tarawa in World War II, very bloody battle.
That was a turning point in the psychology of the United States, because back then remember in theaters they had newsreels, and after the Battle of Tarawa, 72-hour bloody battle, it's the first time newsreels were in color and showed American servicemen floating face down in the water, dead.
Yes, my father saw that. He waded ashore after the first waves. Very interesting. Well, what's fascinating about you, Admiral Gary E. Hall, is that first you start as a Lutheran, became Catholic, and in the Navy you started as an enlisted man, and wound up going to the Naval Academy and became here an admiral. What a journey! Wow.
As I say, from restriction to rear admiral, it could happen. If it happened to me, and so I was put on restriction. I at a surprise inspection one morning at the Naval Academy Prep School. We had a Marine major do morning inspection. He goes, "Hall, you didn't shave." So he put me on report, and on the back of the report sheet, you could write a rebuttal, and I wrote, "I shaved this morning, but by the time I got done with my legs, my blade was too dull for my face."
Now, how does that go over with the brass?
That does not go. That does not go over. That just leads to restriction. But I now have buddies from back in those days that remember things like that, and they said, "Oh, we knew you were going to be an admiral," and I throw the BS flag and go, yeah, it's easy to have 20/20 hindsight now, but I always had fun in the Navy. Before I joined the Navy, an old Marine said, "Gary, if they tell you to put your head in a bucket of water, put your head in a bucket of water, because they're not going to let you drown." And so I took everything with a grain of salt, and I had fun through all the processes, through the fun things, through the difficult things, and I was blessed. And so, again, blessed with a wonderful woman who supported me, blessed with a family that loved me unconditionally. And my wife pointed out, even when you weren't lovable, and my father-in-law taught me how to love unconditionally. He taught me how to love my grandchildren with enthusiasm. And so I've been extremely blessed man, and I thank God every single day for that. And at every Mass, I get down on my knees, because Father Burns said at the end of Mass, you should get down on your knees and thank God for all you have. And I say, thank you, Lord, for Darlene. Through her, all my blessings flow.
Amen. How long have you been working on Navigating Leadership, your new book that's available on Amazon?
For years, because my wife would say, "Where's your book? Everybody's writing books. Where's your book?" And I gave a speech on leadership for decades. It always had great response to it. And then I met some people on a podcast, and they said, "Where's your book, Admiral Hall?" And I said, "It's up here in my head, or it's in my pen, and I just have to squeeze it out." And they said, "Well, we're publishers and editors. We're going to get you to write that book." So I created an outline. They helped me with that. And then it took about 4 months to write and 2 months to edit and format. So it's about a 6-month journey, but it's based on, 40 years of leadership.
I was going to say a lifetime, really, of intelligence flowing into this one volume.
Right.
What do you hope people will get from this book after they read it?
Well, that one, to not doubt themselves, that you can flunk third grade, you can make mistakes, and you can overcome all these things and become great and, set goals and achieve them, and that never write anybody out. And there's lessons in here to, do some self-introspection, how to set some goals, and some fun stories to show you that if I can do it, you can do it. And not everybody's going to be an admiral, but, everybody can be successful in their family's eyes and in the Lord's eyes. And so I think it will tell a humble journey, a conversion of faith, and the importance of faith, humility, and a good supporting team to succeed.
And in the last minute or two we have left, how important is faith to becoming a good leader?
Well, I think faith grounds you. Faith, when things get tough, if you have faith, you can settle yourself and you can concentrate and solve the problems that you face. And I'll tell you, people have replaced God with drugs, alcohol, smoking, sex, addiction, pornography, and they haven't gotten any happier. Bring God into your life and you'll be happy, because it is the most wonderful thing. And it'll make for a better marriage. And I meet young officers that have full faith now, and I'm going, gosh, I wish I was that when I was 22. I wish I had that faith. Well, a chaplain said, you get it when you get it. And I'm thankful that I got it.
I've seen the same thing in some of the young men who are coming up through the co-sponsored seminarian program to become chaplains. It's a sight to behold, and yes, it's enviable to see someone as young as these men are in their 20s, and they already have this strong sense of faith. You've been listening to Catholic Military Life, a podcast of the Archdiocese for the Military Services. And we've been talking to retired Rear Admiral Gary E. Hall about his new book, Navigating Leadership, Making a Pact with Excellence, published by Mediacasters Publishing House. You can find this book on Amazon. Admiral Hall, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you, Taylor. It's been an honor. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Admiral's Almanac. Please share with your family and friends. I'm your host, retired Rear Admiral Gary Hall, author of the best-selling book, Navigating Leadership, Making a Pact with Excellence, available on Amazon.com and BarnesandNoble.com. It's the perfect gift for the leaders in your life. Pick up your copy today. Follow the Admiral's Almanac wherever quality podcasts are hosted, and reach out to me if you'd like a keynote speaker at your next event or want personal coaching on your career goals. Again, thanks for listening to this episode of the Admiral's Almanac. As we say in the Navy, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. Until we meet again, I'm Rear Admiral Gary Hall.